The Scars of Eden, Chapter 6, Secrets and Revelations. Campo de Fiore, Rome, Italy, February 6, 1600. In space, there are countless constellations, suns, and planets. We see only the suns because they give light. The planets remain invisible, for they are small and dark. There are also numberless Earths circling around their suns. It is unreasonable to suppose that those teeming worlds should not bear similar or even more perfect inhabitants than our Earth. These are the words of an inspirational speaker, a friar of the Dominican order. His ideas about the cosmos are stimulating and stretching, but they are not entirely new. 2.5 millennia ago, Hinduism's Vishnu Purana shared a similar vision. It spoke of planet Earth as being one of billions of inhabited planets scattered throughout the cosmos. However, what is considered possible in the East is totally unacceptable in the Catholic West, and Giordano Bruno's repetition of this cosmic vision is one of the many things he has said that have brought him to this public square and sealed his grisly fate. For the last 7 years, Giordano Bruno has been in prison, where he has been held without trial in the hope that he might recant his heretical ideas. Such a recantation might have broken the spell of his popularity among the public, who flocked in great numbers to his lectures and demonstrations of mental skills. A recantation would serve as a warning to Christians throughout Europe never to stray too far from Catholic orthodoxy. But Bruno has not recanted, and so a trial has been hurried through to allow for a public execution today that will send shockwaves through Christendom for decades to come and leave people in no doubt that the ideas of Giordano Bruno are ideas to be avoided at every possible cost. Armed papal officers standing on the street corners are marshaling the crowds and encouraging them to cheer as the filthy, bloodied object of a man is dragged into the market square, called the Field of Flowers. Few would recognize him as the charismatic scholar who only a few years ago was dazzling Europe with his speaking tours. His public demonstrations of phenomenal mental skills and his various books on mental self-improvement and mnemonics have made him a popular figure in a Europe hungry for new ideas. Today, he is an object of horror. The papal guards unchain the man and fix him on a stake upside down. One guard now pulls the man's tongue forward out of his mouth and nails it to the stake. Next, he draws a knife from his scabbard and uses it to sever the man's tongue. Other officers of the church now step forward to ignite the pyre positioned below the man's head. The crowd watches in fearful approval as Giordano Bruno goes up in flames. It is Ash Wednesday. So what were the dangerous ideas that ended the life of this brilliant Dominican friar so tragically? Firstly, Bruno was a man well ahead of his time in embracing the science of Copernicus, which asserted that the earth orbits the sun, not vice versa. Bruno, however, went even further. He claimed that the stars that we see are in fact other suns like our own, and that just as Earth orbits the sun, so other planets orbit those other suns, planets which may be home to other beings, other people, other civilizations. The words I quoted at the top of the chapter were written by Bruno in 1584. Bruno's studies in Plato and the intellectual children of Plato led him to view that our universe is ever expanding and that the process of creation is still unfolding, generating space, time, and matter from an infinitesimal 0 point. The consciousness we experience is part of the consciousness of our planet and cosmos. Our consciousness precedes our life on Earth and takes us to other realms, maybe to other parts of the universe, when our life on Earth concludes. Our consciousness unites us with the source of the universe. It can be heightened and developed in a way that transforms our potential in this life. This was the belief that had motivated Bruno's hugely popular speaking tours. Where Giordano Bruno really ruffled some feathers was in his teachings about Jesus Christ. For Bruno, Jesus reveals divinity to us not because he is different to the rest of us, but because he is the same, a soul on the same great journey as the rest of us, only far more conscious of his identity with the source. When we look to Jesus, we are looking to a model for our own life. It was an exciting and empowering belief, but it bumped up against Catholic orthodoxy's emphasis on the divinity and uniqueness of Jesus. Bruno's beliefs about human consciousness left no room for the fear of hellfire with which his opponents tried to threaten him. In fact, when his sentence was pronounced in an ecclesiastical court, he famously looked at his prosecutors and said, "I can see in your eyes that you are the ones who are afraid, not I." Given how emphatic the Church's refutation of Giordano Bruno had been, I was in a state of open-mouthed disbelief when in 2009 I heard the same institution challenging the world to reconsider the possibility that humanity may be part of a much larger cosmic family. Christian believers ought to be ready, they said, not only to believe in, but to embrace a brother or sister alien. These were the conclusions of a Pontifical Academy of Sciences after a 5-day colloquium of closed sessions in which an exclusive selection of senior scholars and theologians talked through the theological implications of contact with other civilizations. Reverend Dr. Guy Cosamano, the senior astronomer for the Vatican Observatory at Mount Graham, Arizona, insisted that believers really shouldn't be surprised to encounter intelligent extraterrestrial beings. They are creatures of the same Creator and children of the same Heavenly Father. We should not be surprised, so he said, because they're in the Bible, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. This was a challenge, and no mistake, an invitation to spot the alien, like a theological version of Where's Wally? Monsignor Corrado Balducci, a senior advisor to the Pope concerning demonology and the paranormal, added another element to the conversation when he wrote that people who report close encounters or abduction experiences are not reporting something demonic or a psychotic episode of some kind. They are reporting a totally different kind of being, one that merits serious study. That's a shift. Coming from the spokespeople for Benedict XVI, the most conservative pope in my lifetime, those statements represent a huge shift. What was forbidden in times past was now being placed squarely back on the table by Roman Catholic authorities. Father Gabriel Funes, the director of the Vatican Observatory, said on more than one occasion that the faithful should be ready to embrace an ET neighbor sooner than anyone anticipates. The message was clear. People, get ready. But why? Why had they taken this taboo subject off the shelf? Why did Vatican spokespeople challenge the faithful to be ready for a disclosure of contact with another civilization with such a sense of urgency? It made me wonder, does the Vatican know more than it is saying? Does it possess information that it is not disclosing? The press statements, articles, and interviews following the colloquium of 2009 represented a 180-degree turn in the curious historic position. Back in 1600, Giordano Bruno's public humiliation and excruciating execution was, of course, a death threat towards Bruno's followers and indeed to any scholar who might choose to investigate such forbidden topics. Just to press the point home, within 3 years of his death by immolation, Bruno's own writings were added to the Index Librorum Prohibitorium, the Roman Catholic Church's official list of books that Catholic believers are not allowed to read. Of course, the use of death threats to silence discussion did not disappear with the turn of the 17th century. In the 20th century, it was a practice still alive and well in the USA, being employed as a way of excising the discussion of extraterrestrial life from the public sphere. Of course, from time to time, death threats have to be followed through, and it was difficult not to be aware of this, growing up where I did. Great Britain, 1982 to 1990. Every morning and every afternoon, I cycled the 6 miles between home and school along a busy stretch of road in Buckinghamshire. Each day the journey takes me past an enigmatic building set back from the road behind the security of a guard post and boom bar. Everyone in the locality knows that it is a research facility staffed by a privileged elite of our scientific research community. There is even a sense of local pride in the place because the technicians at this facility have been engaged to help develop state-of-the-art weaponry commissioned by President Reagan for deployment in space. These will be the first off-planet armaments ever developed. In a speech at the United Nations, President Reagan has framed the importance of this top-secret project in dramatic terms. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, as I ask you, is not an alien threat already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war? The Reagan administration will be investing $53 billion into Star Wars, a military response to the aforementioned alien threat. Its phenomenal price tag and the fact that Star Wars is high technology for warfare off-planet has raised more than a few eyebrows. My friends and I wonder if the president's cryptic words are about an alien threat of war or a threat of alien war. Is that what our Star Wars defenses are really for? If these questions haven't given us enough reason to wonder if something odd might be going on, the suicides of 25 scientists working on the project at the mysterious facility down the road certainly have. As the drama plays out, one by one, the families of the victims come forward to contradict the company's story. No, these deaths were not suicides. The families want to let the world know that their son, their husband, their father was not distressed or depressed prior to being found dead. The families completely reject the official story intended to explain away the sequence of deaths at the company. The various coroners involved are also not playing ball with the official story. One after another, the coroners return open verdicts with only a couple of cases strangely classed as misadventure. Now the victims' union leader steps into the fray, Clive Jenkins, General Secretary of the Association of Scientific, Technical, and Managerial Staffs, ASTMS. Categorizing these deaths as suicides is, he says, statistically incredible. His association members are deeply concerned by what he calls these clusters of suicides, violent deaths, or murders. Clive Jenkins is calling it for what it is and is insisting on an urgent government inquiry. Margaret Thatcher's administration, however, considers an inquiry to be quite unnecessary since the relevant ministers is more than willing to bring us the official explanation. The sad succession of suicide is, he says, no more than a sequence of unfortunate coincidences, 25 of them. There will be no inquiry. The tragedy of these deaths through the 1980s was a powerful reminder that we were still deep in the era of silence and denial. Evidently, lessons have been learned since the days of the Inquisition. Why silence communities of people with public shows of torture and emulation, such as in the case of Giordano Bruno, when a conspicuous number of unfortunate coincidences can serve the exact same purpose? One man who deplored the use of death threats against witnesses of UFO phenomena was Apollo astronaut Ed Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon. Ed Mitchell worked tirelessly to disempower these kinds of threats, which he knew to have been put upon his friends and fellow townspeople from Roswell, New Mexico. At the turn of the new millennium, this commitment was on full view. The Washington Press Club, Washington, D.C., May 9, 2001. Ed Mitchell is standing at the podium of the Washington Press Club. The room is buzzing with more than 60 military, corporate, government, civil aviation, and scientific experts, all present to testify before an eager crowd of photographers, journalists, and reporters. Some are ash white. Others are weeping. For some of them, today will be the first time they have breached their security orders to speak publicly on their knowledge and experience of the UFO phenomenon and of an extraterrestrial presence. Ed Mitchell is speaking. Some of the old people who had been involved at the time, what I call the old-timers, who were involved in 1947 with the Roswell Crash, people like in the sheriff's department who had been to the crash site and were supervising traffic. My friend and the friend of our family, the major who was in the administrative function at the Walker Air Base. These folks, because they had been shushed and told not to talk about their experience by military authority and on dire consequences if they did, felt that now in the 1970s, many years later, that they did not want to go to the grave with their story. They wanted to tell someone reliable, and being a local boy and having been to the moon, they considered me reliable enough to whisper in my ear their particular story and their involvement with the Roswell crash. A man of deep compassion and humanity, Ed Mitchell has been motivated by his sympathy for his fellow townspeople, families whose lives were deeply hurt by a great conspiracy of silence, fathers who carried the weight of the death threats over their children spoken by military authorities, threats that their wives and children would die should they ever breathe a word about what they had seen. The day of the Roswell crash, the local press reported it. The day after the crash, the official narrative cut in and the story changed. A weather balloon. But Roswell is an object lesson in which indigenous narrative survives. Before they die, many times immediately before they die, our ancestors, the old-timers, communicate to their descendants what it really was that they saw and heard. Roswell was, in fact, one of a number of instances of group encounters with UFOs in America in the years immediately following World War II. Prior to Roswell, U.S. Department of Defense would brief the public and the press reported freely. The official line was, "We are engaging with UFOs. We are pursuing them. We don't know what they are, but when we ascertain what they are, we will tell you." Newspaper headlines of the day blazed. Flying saucer found. Army reveals disc picked up in New Mexico. Herald Express. RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. Roswell Daily Record. And then, from the day after Roswell, silence. Logic would suggest that U.S. Defense did ascertain what they were, but did not want to talk about it. The new policy of silence was the fruit of the National Security Act, signed into law by President Truman in that same year of 1947. It laid the foundations for the establishment of the CIA, with a hierarchy of classifications that can keep even presidents well out of the loop, if necessary. Among other things, the National Security Act classified all official UFO research. It concretized the shift in policy from a promised disclosure to a pattern of silence, debunking, and death threats. And the people of Roswell were among the very first to feel the weight of that shift. Ed Mitchell saw firsthand the cost of the 1947 policy and became a tireless advocate for its repeal. As Dr. Mitchell speaks to the gathered press in 2001, this policy of denial has been in place for 54 years. What I am guessing is that it is now time to put away this embargo of truth about the alien presence, and I call on our government to open up, as other governments have. For any hearers new to the topic or skeptical regarding the UFO phenomenon, Dr. Mitchell highlights the most grounded and objective aspect of this field of study. Read the lore, he says. By the lore, he means the report of those involved, the testimony of eyewitnesses, the current indigenous narrative. Only in our period do we really have evidence. Read the books. Read the lore concerning crash retrievals and start to understand what has really been going on, because there is no doubt we are being visited. More than once through the years, investigators asked the late Dr. Mitchell whether NASA was covering up knowledge of extraterrestrial contact. Dr. Mitchell's words were always carefully chosen. He would say, officially, NASA does not know anything about extraterrestrials and the UFO phenomenon, because that is not their mission. Rather than attack NASA, Ed Mitchell's ire appeared to be reserved for U.S. military who had threatened his fellow Americans and enforced the government's policy of denial. He believed that the classification of ET contact has kept humanity from taking its proper place among a community of spacefaring civilizations, and has also deprived human society of the incredible benefits of technologies availed to us by ET contact. Consider this. Along with every other astronaut, technician, administrator, and staffer on the Mercury and Apollo programs and throughout NASA, Ed Mitchell was bound by layer on layer of official secret laws. We can be confident, therefore, that there was plenty he was not allowed to say. Considering what he was allowed to say, you have to wonder what else Ed Mitchell would have longed to say, had he been given the freedom. Amid all the speculation, report, debunking, theorizing, and ridicule, the one thing Dr. Mitchell believed would cut through all the noise was the physical evidence of materials retrieved from UFO crashes. A lot of information was already out there in 2001 in the form of a number of books, hence his appeal to the public to read them. But what he longed to see was the vital addition of an official government acknowledgement. Sadly, Ed Mitchell did not live to see it. He passed away on February 4th, 2016. The very next year, in December, the New York Times released videos of an incident in 2004 in which the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz deployed 2 pilots to engage with 2 tic-tac-shaped craft. These UFOs, or UAPs, to use today's nomenclature, exhibited the classic properties of UFOs: unbelievable speed, physically impossible maneuvers, and animal-like agility as they effortlessly evaded the F-18 Super Hornets dispatched in pursuit. The newspaper also uncovered a secret unit within the Pentagon whose remit was the investigation of UFOs. 2 years later, in 2019, the U.S. Navy released 3 videos and debriefed the press regarding the 2004 Nimitz incident and 2 other similar incidents in 2004 and 2015. All of a sudden, official personnel at every level were acknowledging what many had long suspected, namely that in the 7 decades since the embargo of 1947, U.S. defense has continually been engaging with UFOs. Not only was the acknowledgement made by senior naval personnel, but we, the public, were allowed to watch the Navy's video footage of the encounter on national television and all over YouTube. In 2020, the Pentagon finally departed from the well-worn script to acknowledge that for the 72 years since the legal classification of UFO research, a Pentagon department in fact has been in place. The New York Times had it right. The unit was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. In case the word advanced isn't clear enough to fully reveal its remit, in 2019, a spokesperson spelled it out for us. Its secret work has been to analyze physical materials from what may be crashed UFOs. The spokesperson who broke this news on national television was the man responsible for running the department from 2007 to 2017, Luis Elizondo. In this new light, it is small surprise, therefore, that by the 1990s, U.S. Defense had been able to provide 40 to 50 personnel for Professor John Mack to interview regarding their close encounters and abduction experiences. Given this late admission, one might reasonably ask, after 70-plus years of engagement and investigation, what has the U.S. Navy concluded about the UFOs? What are they? Where are they from? Apparently, the U.S. Department of Defense doesn't know, but they will surely let us know as soon as they find out. Suddenly, we're back to the pre-1947 policy. I have to ask, how much longer can that non-explanation continue to be wheeled out and received with any degree of credibility? Perhaps that is why in 2020, some more concrete language has appeared from official sources on the public stage. Within months of these disclosures from the Pentagon and the U.S. Navy, a consultant to the Pentagon, the astrophysicist Eric W. Davis, gave an extraordinary interview to the New York Times. Eric Davis has the interesting responsibility for providing regular briefings to America's Department of Defense concerning the UFO phenomenon. As recently as March 2020, Davis reported he had provided a briefing for the Office of Naval Intelligence Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force concerning materials recovered from off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. This is quite a specific form of words. Between 1947 and 2019, such an assertion would have been met with an emphatic denial from official sources, or at the very least, an official alternative. NASA felt the need to meet the press and say, Dr. Mitchell is a great American, but we do not share his opinions on this issue. By contrast, in 2020, serious figures around the world have stepped forward to confirm the credibility of Eric Davis's statements to the press. For instance, the former director of French intelligence, the General Directorate for External Security, the DGSE, Alain Houliet, spoke to the press and said, I was fortunate to be in attendance at the origin of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program's research program on UFOs in the American Department of Defense. In an even more astonishing turn of events, in December 2020, Brigadier General Chaim Eshed, former chief of Israel's military space security program, met the press with a statement acknowledging not just off-world technology, but asserting that covert layers of government are aware of an intergalactic council awaiting the right time to self-disclose. In the USA, within days of the Eric W. Davis interview appearing in the New York Times, Chris Mellon, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush, appeared on CNN to make the following comments. I know Eric very well. I was present at Eric Davis's briefings on the Hill. It is an issue that should be taken seriously. To my amazement, as I sat watching, Mellon went even further. Without any prompting, Mellon slapped onto the table the controversy and cover-up surrounding the famed crash of 1947 at Roswell, New Mexico. He said this, curiously, on Father's Day, June 21, 2020, President Trump indicated on air while being filmed that he did have classified information about Roswell, New Mexico. When asked by his son about declassifying it, he said, I have to think about it. I don't know what about Roswell could be classified or interesting, other than that one particular issue. He meant the crash and the retrieved materials. There is a lot of new information coming forward, and I think this is a topic that the Oversight Committee should take seriously and investigate. In some of these cases, we have information from multiple radar systems, infrared systems, multiple naval personnel on the ground and in the air. And we're tracking these objects performing maneuvers that clearly indicate they're under intelligent control. They're responding to our aircraft, they're outmaneuvering them, and they're doing things that are far beyond any capability we possess. This is not unique to the United States. Our military personnel have similar experiences when they are deployed abroad in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere. By all accounts, it is definitely a worldwide phenomenon. It is not difficult to join the dots. Yet if I had not been confronted with these announcements from government spokespeople before my research for Escaping from Eden, I really don't know what I would have done with them. I had no theological grid to accommodate extraterrestrial civilization even existing, let alone turning up. Like many religious believers, I saw the universe through a lens that permitted me to perceive God, the devil, angels, demons, humans, animal, vegetable, and mineral. Anything that didn't fit into one of those boxes would have to be denied or reinterpreted. But the drip of credible reports, the abeyance of policy of silence, and the bona fides of witnesses such as John Mack, Ed Mitchell, Monsignor Corrado Balducci, and Reverend Dr. Guy Consolmagno had gradually eroded the containment power of familiar assumptions and beliefs. And for me, by the time Luis Elizondo, Eric Davis, Alain Juliet, and Chris Mellon were coming to the stage, my world had already changed. The red pill of that plural word, Elohim in the biblical text, had opened the door to a whole universe of possibilities. As I have continued my explorations of Genesis and the many world mythologies it parallels, I have come to see the coherence of a worldview with room for a wider cosmic family. Given the scale of our universe, the conspicuous gaps in our knowledge concerning human origins, and the plethora of clues in fields including archaeology, cosmology, theology, astrophysics, paleobiology, DNA research, and neurology, it really isn't hard to find the wiggle room to allow for the possibility of extraterrestrials, both in our cosmos and in our history. Yet even without the threat of death, whether by execution or by unfortunate coincidence, the admission of ETs into mainstream conversation is rarely made. I hear this sad fact stated and restated in my inbox with dismaying regularity. Some months I hear every week. Some weeks I hear every day from people who tell me things like this. I asked a question in my Bible study group about ETs, and I was threatened as if I was either stupid or mentally ill. I am a priest involved in pastoral responses to paranormal phenomena. A number of people have reported close encounters to me. I mentioned this to my bishop, and he told me never to speak of it again. I told my family about what happened to me 25 years ago when I was 11 years old. It has traumatized me and changed who I am. They couldn't stop laughing. This is why I tend not to acknowledge my experience with other people. Humans are social animals. We are hardwired to fit in and win approval. It is how we learn and walk and talk. Consequently, peer pressure and the fear of ridicule is more than enough to silence most of us. I say this without any judgment because this was my story too. At the age of 17, I had a powerful spiritual experience and made a life-changing decision to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. It was a pleasure to discover a group of friends willing to show their vulnerability and pursue something beyond themselves. But there is a funny tension in the world of faith between inquiry and conclusions. The fact is, most communities of faith are built on a certain canon of conclusions. To stray too far beyond that canon is therefore to undermine your credibility and usefulness to the group. Approval is best maintained by confirming yourself to the mantra of the group's shared conclusions. I learned this lesson early on as a young Christian. When I was 11, my parents introduced me to the blockbuster of a book, Chariots of the Gods, by Swiss writer Erich von Däniken. In the decades since, the book has enjoyed no shortage of detractors. But for me, it identified with great clarity the gap in our ability to explain ourselves as a conscious, intelligent, and technological species. It also shone a spotlight onto sufficient evidence to raise the possibility that our ancient ancestors had intersected with interstellar visitors. Furthermore, the book named senior researchers in the field of DNA research and astrophysics, figures such as Francis Crick and Carl Sagan, who had argued the view that life on Earth had originated elsewhere in the universe and had landed in media-carrying genetic coding, sometime in the distant past, on our hospitable and watery planet. But what Chariots of the Gods did not do was settle the question of where we all came from. It just moved the question off planet. After long reflection, my wanderings led me to investigate the Jesus of the Gospels. In him I found a credible figure with valuable teachings. My reasoning about Jesus, however, didn't settle my questions about the cosmos. How did everything begin? What was or is the cosmic source? Is the cosmos populated? Do we share the cosmos with ET species? And if so, are we related? My appetite for answers to these questions was as keen as ever. For those reasons, it was with some excitement that at the age of 17, I stumbled across some cryptic sayings made by Jesus in the Gospel of John. In the 16th chapter of the Gospel, I came across a scene in which Jesus explains to his apostles that there are some other really important pieces of information he would love to share with them about life, the universe, and everything. However, even after knowing him most of their lives, some of them, and even after 3 years of daily teaching, Jesus didn't think they would be able to handle the information he wanted to pass on. The Holy Spirit would have to lead them on that adventure after his time. Given that Jesus had said some pretty far-out things during his 3 years of teaching, I had to wonder what the nature of this hard-to-process other information could possibly be. Then in the 10th chapter, Jesus says this, I have others who are not of this fold. I must bring them also so that we can be in unity. Others? Not of this fold. Reverend Dr. Guy Consolmagno argues that in this passage Jesus is referring to unnamed extraterrestrial beings, presumably the ones we should be ready to embrace sooner than anyone anticipates. As a 17-year-old, I saw that possibility right away and put the idea to my Christian friends at school one day. Their reaction was emphatic. Paul, if you're going to be a Christian, you better forget about your theories about the universe, okay? Get with the program. So I did. So much so that I became a preacher, a church planner, a church doctor, a theological educator, and an archdeacon for the Anglican Church in Australia. But like many others within the program, I found that my questions remained live. Somehow, alongside all the orthodox conclusions familiar within the Christian community of faith, I always found plenty of room for questions about the universe and our many anomalous experiences as a human race. That's why today it is with a great measure of empathy that I receive and read messages from people who have journeyed for decades with their own body of questions. Questions about their own anomalous experiences. Questions many have carried in silence. It is why I count it a privilege to be asked questions like these. What happened to me when I was 15? Have you heard anything like that before? How do I live a regular life with the memories I'm carrying and can't deny? What do I say to my bishop who has asked me to never talk about the things my parishioners are experiencing? If the Elohim stories of the Bible are really about aliens and not about God at all, then where does Jesus fit into the picture? Did Jesus know about aliens? And if he knew, how did all that knowledge get forgotten? Or was Jesus an alien? Or didn't he really exist? Was Jesus invented to create a convenient religion for the Roman Empire? How does it all go together? In the wake of all these questions, something has happened that I never expected. When I first wrote Escaping from Eden and began appearing on shows like George Norrie's Coast to Coast and Sean Stone's Buzzsaw, and when I first started generating video content on The Fifth Kind TV, I somewhat expected that popular demand for me as a pastor would fall off rather dramatically. Instead, personal requests for my services as a pastor and personal coach have exploded out of my little corner of Australia and opened up all around the world. Today I am sharing the journey with a great many as they navigate the confusion that so often results as an old worldview trips over itself and another one takes shape. It's why on this particular morning I am sitting in my study in Canberra, Australia, with my laptop ready, waiting for a call from Reuben. He is in Lithuania sitting in his study, wondering how aliens in the Bible are going to impact his work as a Baptist missionary. And that is the end of chapter 6. Peace and blessings to you all.